I'm treating a guy that multiple AK rounds to his femur and just gushing blood. And the thing is, like, right off the bat, it's, hey, stop the bleeding, right? That's the first thing you do is so you put a tourniquet on the guy, wrench it down, and he took like 3 AK rounds to the upper thigh. 7.62, these things are beefy rounds. I start pushing gauze into it, and it felt like when you break a glass and the glass is like those super fine shards. That's what it felt like in his upper thigh. His femur was just in shards.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear the combat story of Patrick Moltrup, a former Marine, soldier, CIA, and special operator who served as a Navy Special Warfare Combatant-Craft Crewmen, or SWCC. He served 25 years in the military, much of it in the special ops community. Patrick was also a Navy Corpsman or medic, attached to various units including Gold Squadron, one of the assault forces for SEAL Team 6, which we hear about in this episode. After leaving the military, Patrick collaborated with Jason Lilly, another former special ops warrior, to create Savage Actual, a YouTube channel and brand where Patrick and Jason discuss games, gear, and the military. They're now working on a video game themselves, have been sponsored by a craft brewing company, and more. I hope you enjoy Patrick's combat story as much as I did. What's up?
Yeah, no, I told my wife, I was like, I'm pseudo dreading this because like the only conversations I've ever had, I think in depth like this about myself was like the VA psych evals when they're like, okay, tell me about yourself. Like, I know there's more, it's just like, I don't know. For me, this is very much new. So
I'm actually glad to hear that because somebody else has asked to interview me, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to be on that side of it. It's easier sitting over here asking the questions.
Yeah. This is definitely a first for me, and it's weird, and it's like, and I was telling my wife, I think it was this morning too, is like I've had so many my memory. I was telling my buddy about it the other day. I'm like, man, I'm like getting to the point where I'm carrying around a little notebook, like writing shit down. Because my wife will be like, hey, can you put this somewhere? And then 2 days later, she'll be like, hey, where's this whatever? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know where I put it. It's like, it's getting to the point where I think I've hit my head so many times. Like it's craziness. So it's like, man, yeah, but.
Well, man, so as we kick off, actually, that was one of the things I wanted to start with was what I read was that you've done 25 years in the military, right? Like special ops. You can't be a day over 40 though, man. Do you have some deal with the devil?
No, I'm actually, I'm a year from 50.
Come on.
Yeah. I was born in 72. So January 26, 72, I'm 49 right now. It's funny. The funny thing is Jason and I we were shooting, we shoot once a month, we do like 4 or 5 episodes at a time. And, we were standing around and somebody, I think our production guy, Kelso said something about my age, and I'm like, I'll be 50 in January. Yeah, I mean, like this coming January, I'll be 50, and they're like, shut the fuck up. There's no, and it's funny, man. I went to my 10-year reunion, and I was working with the agency at the time, and I just happened to be in New York, and I got an email, and I was like a couple hours from my home where I was born, and so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go to my reunion, and my friends were just like, dude, you look like the same as you did in high school. So yeah. Especially if I completely shave and my hair is short, it's just like, yeah. So
awesome. All right. Well, take me through Patrick as a kid then. You kind of alluded to it, but did you grow up on the beaches? I know we're going to go through the Marine SWCC side, but like what was your childhood like that got you set up for that?
You know what? I was pretty far from the water. I mean, it wasn't like I was a beach kid or anything like that. I grew up primarily in upstate New York, kind of west of Albany. So like in the foothills of the Catskill Mountains, I went to a super small school, Fonda Fultonville Central, like right on the shores of the Mohawk River. And my brother and I and our friends, man, I grew up just like running through the woods like a crazy person. And so it was like, but the cool thing was it was my access to water at that time were ponds. And, at one point, my parents had a pool. We had a above ground pool because it's New York, it's upstate New York. So the ground gets super cold. So there's not a whole lot of in-ground pools around there. And I remember we had an above ground pool, and it was kind of funny. One year, my mom used to always feed the birds on the back of our porch, and she'd get super worked up because these big, huge red squirrels would get in there and like eat all the bird seed. And she told my dad one time, she's like, "You need to get those out of there. You need to shoot one of those squirrels and show them what's going on." My dad went up in the window and shot a .22. It went through the squirrel, hit our pool. And so now we've got a .22 size hole in our pool. And this was like late fall. So when winter came and water had been pouring through that little hole, it froze and then expanded. It ended up splitting the aluminum siding around the pool and just destroyed the whole pool. It fell apart in our yard. And it was, needless to say, my parents were pretty unhappy about that,
but he hit the squirrel is part.
He did hit the squirrel. The squirrel. So yeah, me and my brother were always running around out in the woods and, our imagination going wild and like building forts and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I remember one time my mom had given us, like, she was going to throw away a stack of old sheets. I don't even know how she had like 20 or 30 sheets. We took them back into the woods and climbed up into this oak tree that was probably 60 or 75 feet high, and like tied all the corners into this tree and made like multiple levels of sheets. And we spent days up there. Like, my mom wouldn't let us spend the night up there. We really wanted to like spend the night in the tree, but she wouldn't let us do it. But I don't know how many times I'd be laying there, like, just my brother's like 2 levels up and I'm laying there, and all of a sudden like one of the corners that we knotted up would give out and you tumble down a couple of levels. It was pretty funny. So we did stuff like that.
God, I feel so bad, like even for my own boys today, that they don't get to do that. Like, when I was younger, I grew up in Southern Africa, and there was just no safety nets at all. Like, we went up 60 or 70 feet and did a zip line. You were not connected to anything, just your hands holding on to something. There was no safety there, man. It was a different time. I mean,
it was like, there was the quote today, free range children or whatever, that's what we used to be. And I remember, I don't even know what the hell I was doing. I was down the street, luckily across the street from my neighbor's house. And I just climbed up in this tree that was way too small for me. And I was at the very top. The whole top broke off, and I fell probably 15 or 20 feet onto my back and landed in a bunch of slate and knocked me out. I woke up to my mom, and the person across the street saw me fall, called up my mom, because everybody knows everybody in that area. Literally everyone knows everybody. If they see you doing something dumb, they're like, "I'm going to call your dad," But they called my mom, and I wake up to my mom and my aunt standing over me, and my mom's like, "What the hell did you do?" Blah, blah. She's like, "You're an idiot. Get up." I was like, that was the kind of crap that we did,
So obviously you and your brother, you're out there making forts. It sounds like maybe you have this military imagination going on. Was your old man in the military, or your uncles? And where did that desire come from for you?
There was no desire. I had it was crazy. So I loved, like I said, running around in the woods. And I think at the time, me and my brother, like, we had the imagination about Voltron and like whatever cartoons were on at the time. It was that kind of stuff. It wasn't really, we didn't talk about the military that much. We didn't think too much about it. And it's kind of bad. We didn't have so my grandfather had been in the Navy. My grandfather had been in World War II. lost an eye in Pearl Harbor. And that was like, he was the big military presence in our family. Yeah. Amazing guy. Just besides the fact my grandfather, I just had a ton of respect for him. Just classic New Yorker, just, him and my grandmother met like, prior to World War II and all that. But just amazing guy. But my uncle had been a Marine, and my parents thought he was a little bit off, and they were always like not his biggest fan. So actually the whole time that I was going through high school, like I said, I was kind of into like the cartoons and, well before the comic book thing ever got big, me and my brother and my friends, we all collected comic books. I can remember when I was like 5-6 years old, my dad's taking me down to the corner store and I'd get like a Mountain Dew and a comic book. And I love that stuff. So I grew up very much into sort of that culture, like the X-Men. I had all the early, all that. So I actually I probably have about 4,000 comic books in storage right now. And I have like the original series of Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that's black and white. I have all that stuff. And so that's kind of what I grew up in. I was drawing all the time. I had a lot of people in my family that were very much like artists, musicians and stuff. My uncle was an amazing musician. My aunt was a painter and all that. And that was when like video cameras and stuff like that started coming around, and, VHS tapes and all that. And my parents me and my brother used to make horror movies. So we got big into horror movies when I was growing up. So I had aspirations of going into special effects or doing something like that, or drawing comic books. That's what I kind of wanted to do, to the point where, so when I got into high school, I had a really cool art teacher. Her name was Miss LaFavor. Never forget the woman. She was just the most even-keeled, coolest lady that I've ever met. And she was like, you have an amazing talent. She's like, you need to put together a portfolio. We'll send it to art schools, and this is what you should do. So I went through the whole thing, and at the time, to submit for an art school for a scholarship, you had to have this huge array of stuff in your portfolio, prints, like to where you cut out the stuff and you actually create printing stuff. I had to do, Jesus Christ, I had to do a mural on a wall that's probably still in the school there, I would think. I have no idea. So I had to do this massive mural. I had to do like black and white photography. So I learned how to at the time we had a photography studio in the school. I learned how to develop photos and do all. So I developed this huge portfolio through, freshman, sophomore, senior year, all that my senior year. And I submitted it to a bunch of places, and I actually got a scholarship to the Joe Kubert School of Art in New Jersey. And this guy was Joe Kubert was a big artist for Sergeant Rock, the comic book. He did Conan, Turok, Son of Stone.
Damn.
He created, him and his son created this art school, and I got a scholarship there, and super stoked. Basically, the only thing my mom and dad were going to be required to pay for is my for my room or whatever, and then the food. Everything else was going to be paid for, which is, for art school, is super expensive. Like all the supplies, it dwarfs what people spend nowadays on books, which is a fair amount. And so randomly, so I told you about my uncle, who my parents thought was a little off.
Crazy uncle, right?
Crazy Uncle Chris, super nice guy though. But his son and I were a couple years apart, but his son was going into the Marine Corps, and he'd already he was 17 at the time. I was older than him. And he had already gone, and his parents signed the thing for him to go in early, as soon as he graduated high school or whatever. And I was getting to the point, and I don't quite know why. I think it was because I spent so much time on the art stuff, it sort of burned me out. And I started questioning whether or not I wanted to do it. And I've always been, I think, pretty much a realist. And I was like, am I going to be able to make money, like be able to, you know, have a career as an artist? You know, I mean, I understood that the chances of me being able to like work at Marvel or do all those things at the time was hard, you know, but even then when it was still such a new thing, I probably had a decent chance, but you know, I still was a realist about it. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm really burnt out. I spend so much time of my time kind of putting all this stuff together. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it anymore. And, I went with my cousin. He's like, hey, come to MEPS. We're doing not MEPS. What do they call it at the time when you go to the freaking recruiting thing on the weekends, and they, the DEP, he was in the delayed entry program, right? Isn't that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. Delayed entry program. He's like, hey man, come to the recruiting station with me this weekend. We're going to do like Marine shit. We're going to do like blah, 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 whatever. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll come check it out. And I was like, this is cool. You know, I met the recruiters, and they're like, hoorah, super motivated and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, that'd be cool. So I went with them back the next month, and I had turned 18, and I signed up for the Marine Corps myself. Didn't tell my parents. And so I was probably a couple months from graduating high school, and the school had called during the day. My mom had written me a $450 check that I needed to put in an envelope and send to the school for my first like semester's worth of room and board or whatever the hell it was. It was just like a down payment for my room, or to set my room aside. And I didn't say shit. I just took the check and I ripped it up and threw it away. And she got a call while I was in school, and they're like, hey, is your son still coming? Because we haven't received his check and blah, blah. Oh. And she thought that I cashed the check and spent it on something or whatever. And I got home, and she cornered me, and she's like, what happened to that $450? What did you do? Blah, 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 blah. I was like, I tore it up and threw it away. I signed up for the Marine Corps. She started crying. She burst into tears and was like dead set against it. So yeah, needless to say, that didn't go over well.
Dude. So wait, like how long did it take to get her? Did she come around like before you actually went to basic?
No, I don't think so. I don't think she really came around up to that point. She, you know, and at the time, this is, and we're talking about my age before. This is 1991. You know, I graduated high school in 91, and it was the Gulf War actually had just was coming to an end. And so that was fresh in our mind. We still had, you know, we had the no-fly zone in Iraq. That, because, you know, that went off in January of that year, and it didn't take long. Obviously, we stomped their guts out pretty quick, and that kind of came to a screeching halt fairly quickly. And so, and before that, obviously, we hadn't done anything in many, many years. I mean, obviously, we Panama, and then I think before that was Vietnam. I mean, obviously, Grenada was something, but it was so small. But before that, I mean, there hadn't been anything that major since Vietnam. So now there's this fresh war that's in her mind, and she was just totally distraught. But when it came down to it, I can remember, like, you know, you graduate boot camp, and the day before they have family day. I don't know how it is for the Army, but you get like an afternoon with your whoever's visiting and stuff. And so, you know, I'm walking around my blues on Paris Island, and she was super proud. And that was like, she was, that did it. She was all in pretty much after that. So,
man, so she thought she was going to have an artist, and instead she had a Marine.
Yes, quite a bit. Yeah. That was probably a shock to her system. It definitely was. Yeah.
The one other question I had, and maybe this is more appropriate later, but like, did you ever have any regrets about not taking that other route? I mean, that's a pretty stark departure from drawing cartoons. Like, you could have worked at Disney or be a Marine. Like, I don't know if there's any a bigger disparity between those two.
There's no bigger chasm from one side to the other. You know what? It's funny because I it's one thing I definitely try to never have regrets, and I don't regret that for sure. But it is funny because it's funny to see what's gotten so huge now. All the stuff with the the Marvel movies and all the stuff like that kind of stuff is so much of a cornerstone of pop culture nowadays. And it's funny because it was like when I was growing up, it was like I loved the X-Men, I loved all that stuff, all the superhero stuff, and I remember seeing a couple of the old movies that came out when I was a little kid, like Spider-Man, and those things were the worst. And I can remember me and my friends always like, man, when one of these days technology is going to improve and these movies are going to be so amazing. And I mean, that's where it is now, So, but potentially it could have been something really cool, but I don't, there's definitely not a regret there at all. I mean, I've had an incredible career and seen things throughout the world that no one else, very few people get to do. And I definitely don't regret it.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into the training. I wanted to ask about Parris Island, actually, because I interviewed Eddie Penny, who was a Marine and then went on to Dev Group. And he was saying, like, that Marine boot camp was no joke. And he was talking about, I think we've called them, like, I grew up in Florida for high school, and we would call them, like, no-see-ums, but, like, these little bugs that...
goddamn. The hell did they call those? Man, this is back to my freaking... head bumps. Not no-see-um. Oh, god damn.
Gnats? No, not gnats.
No, not gnats. And it's a huge thing out there, man. And it is like a whole nother level.
He said it was brutal, man. Just like trying to stand at attention or whatever you had to do without moving. And I hadn't ever thought of that because I've never been to Parris Island, but I do know from the coast there what that's
sand
like.
Fleas. That's what they're called.
That's it. Yeah.
Sand fleas, and it is a whole. I've never, it's funny because it's like I've never really been. I've always been pretty confident in kind of what I could do, and I know so much of the stuff that we've done in the guys in the special operations community. It's so much of it is that mental side, having that trust in yourself and that self-confidence and that self-motivation. And I can remember getting off the plane because the whole crap where I had to go to Albany and spend the night in a shitty hotel, and they put me on a plane and I fly to, South Carolina and Parris Island. Like, I think someplace around Beaufort. I don't even remember because it's in the middle of the night. I never for 1 second had any concern because once I had made that determination that, hey, I'm going to Marine Corps boot camp, I was like running every day. I was doing push-ups, doing all this stuff. I was like, I'm going to be prepared. And when I got off the plane, holy shit, the humidity was like hitting a brick wall. And it's not like that in upstate New York. It's just not, and I mean, even midsummer, it gets hot, but it's not that humid. This was like 110% humidity. I could feel my hands start sweating and I'm off the plane, like walking down the like ramp to go into the airport. And I was like, what the hell? The air was heavy. It felt like it was harder to breathe. I felt like I was on the goddamn moon. And that was the first time I was like, whoa, this is really weird. I never experienced, because I never really, growing up, I hadn't traveled a whole lot. And so that was, for me, that was a huge, I'd never been to the South. So that was just a huge hurdle that I didn't see coming at all.
God. All right. So you go to boot camp, and I know that you later transitioned to the Navy. So like, what is your time as a Marine like? And it sounds like you went straight in to be in the infantry, right? So talk us through what that looked like, your Marine time.
Yeah. I tell you, from beginning to end, I definitely had a very unconventional career. So I went from boot camp, and I signed up, and this is where the recruiters come in. So I signed up for I wanted to be in 0311, which is infantry, it'd be 11 Bravo in the Army or whatever. So I wanted to be, I want to be infantry. And that's what I said. I'm like, I want to fight. I want to learn how to do all that cool shit. That's what I want to do. And but the recruiters are like, well, you can sign up for a security forces contract. And I'm like, what is that? And they're like, well, it's like you shoot different weapons and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't, in their defense, it wasn't a complete and total lie, but it's not exactly what I expected. And you're laughing. It's like, I think 90% of the kids like coming out of the recruiter's office are like, what the fuck did that guy just do to me? You know? But so I was in 0311. So I went to security forces school, but it was kind of crazy because at the time, the Marine Corps had created something called MCT, which is Marine Combat Training. And that was for basically, you know, the whole every Marine is a rifleman thing. They basically wanted to start putting all the support troops through more rifleman-centric training. So basically what the Marine Corps came up with this idea like, hey, once everyone graduates boot camp, we're going to come back from their 10 days leave and everybody is going to go through MCT, including the infantry people, to learn goddamn infantry tactics. So I spent 30 days at Camp Geiger. Geiger Tigers is what everybody called you. So I spent 30 days at Camp Geiger learning basic infantry tactics with a bunch of like, you know, people that are going to go on to be like, you know, Humvee mechanics and God knows what else.
Yep.
And so you do that for 30 days. And then for the infantry guys, they're like, and that's after that, everybody goes to your A school. So for the infantry guys, they're like, grab your goddamn rucksack and your freaking sea bag and walk down the street to infantry school. It was literally like a block away.
No break.
So I just spent 30 days. And so I graduated in October, 10 days leave, and it was like November to December timeframe that I did MCT. Again, like freaking ruck marches, rifle stuff, like squad assaults, all basic infantry shit. And then I pick up my freaking sea bag and we walked a block away to infantry school and started it all over again. Obviously way more in depth. Now infantry school was, I don't remember now, it's maybe 60 days, something. I don't remember off the top of my head, but the funny thing is like probably 15 years ago, the Marines like, why are we sending infantry guys through MCT? So they canked that. So now nobody does that anymore. It's somebody wised up and said, hey, let's save ourselves, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or per Marine probably, and not send them to freaking infantry school or MCT. So now it still exists, but now infantry guys don't go to that anymore. So yeah.
Got it. And so how long did you spend as a Marine then, Patrick? Was it
4 years? In the 4 years, 91 to 95. Like I had a kind of interesting career. So 0311, security forces. And that was kind of my first taste of craziness because I went to through the security forces and I'm getting deployed. Spent some time in Somalia, and that was where I really first was like, oh shit, there's people shoot at you, and you know. So that was actually I was in there when the UNSCOM or whatever the heck it was, when all that stuff was going on, pre, you know, Blackhawk Down, right before all that stuff happened, I was out there. And so that was like my first, like, holy shit, Africa is exactly what everyone thinks it is.
Man, talk about, like, you were just saying you hadn't even been to the South and now you're in Somalia.
Yeah. Oh man. Ridiculous. I mean, it was super interesting, and but it was, you know what, at the time it was exactly what I wanted to do, because it was an experience that you can't get anywhere else, you know. And but seeing, you know, there's Italian troops there was French legionnaires there. They were actually the first guys. I can remember when we were on the ground, they were the first ones that actually kind of got into a little shooting match with some of the locals. And, you know, we were going in and out of the airport, and we were doing initially like there to help secure the embassy, because that's kind of what the Fast Company does. And now it's a huge organization, but at the time it was really small. There was like 10 platoons and we were all in one spot on Norfolk Naval Base. And, but yeah, it was very interesting, you know. But it was cool seeing like the big military machine at work. Cause up to that point, it'd been just like, you know, training. And, but yeah, I had gone through security forces school and all in Virginia and stuff before that. And so it was, it was definitely an interesting experience. And then, like I said, I was in 0311. So I had orders to 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines down in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to an infantry battalion. This is going to be crazy. But again, it's like, there wasn't a whole lot going on in the world. And I showed up to receiving in Camp Lejeune, and you sit there for like a week while they dick around with your paperwork. And one day I remember, I mean, God damn, there was just a lot of sitting around for nothing. We just sit in this big room in rows of chairs, and they're like a bunch of admin shitheads are like, you know, going through your paperwork, and 2 guys walk in, 2 Marines walk in, and they're like, does anybody here have any boat experience? And I'm looking around and I'm like, man, that sounds cool. And I had no real boat experience to speak of, but I could swim really well. And I like put my hand up, and they're like, a couple other guys did too. And they're like, what experience you have? I made up some bullshit. I totally lied. I was like, oh yeah, I'm from upstate New York, and I grew up on the Adirondack lakes, and my parents had a boat, and I would drive the boat around the lake all the time. I canoed around the lake maybe once when I was growing up, and that was about the extent of my experience. And they're like, okay, you, and they took like 6 of us, and they brought us. They took all of our paperwork, they took our records, and they took us over to someplace on Camp Lejeune. It used to be there's like in the center of Camp Lejeune, there's like this big steam plant, and they had a compound right next to it that was the future small craft company. It was the riverine unit for the Marine Corps that just got stood up. So they had like all this money coming in, and they were standing up a riverine unit for the Marine Corps. And so they sat us down and went through like an interview. I interviewed with the company gunny, and then they're like, did a PT test, and I can't remember what else we did. They like asked us some questions about boats again that I don't remember what it was, but I completely lied. And they kept me.
So what kind of craft, like what are the boats that you're using at that time?
They had 2 or 3 platoons. One was called the RAC platoon, RAC, and it stood for Riverine Assault Craft. And it was like almost looked like the old PBRs from Vietnam, like had a covered top, a gun. You had a kind of gunnel or whatever the hell you call it. That's some Navy term. That's for being a Navy guy. I don't know shit about the Navy really. They had a gun like mount or gun tub in the front that we would always put like a 50 cal there. And then they had another mount in the back, was usually a 50 cal or like a Mark 19. And on the sides, they had a couple of other mounts, and we would put either a saw or God, I don't even know if we had gone to the 240s yet. I mean, at the time we still had frickin' M60. So I think we had some of those. But yeah. And I ended up in the RAC platoon, and I did that until I got out in like 95. But then the other platoon was like a small boats platoon, or I can't remember exactly what the platoons, but they were all Zodiacs and another thing called a Rigid Raider, which was like a fiberglass boat with a console in the center and like 2 Evinrude 250s in the back. And it was all open. There wasn't nothing to it, you know, and it was, that was the small boats platoon too. So, and that was like, the big stuff that we did was like all counter drug stuff down in South America. And that was their primary thing.
So Patrick, you go on to like a long career in the Navy. What was the decision to leave the Marine Corps?
It was funny because it was like 95 time frame. It was like the summer. It was coming. I think I had about a month or so left. and I had to go over and see the career counselor or career planner, whatever the hell they're called. And I'd actually considered trying out for Force Recon at the time. So they about once a month they held an in-doc, and it was, you know, a ruck, a swim, can't remember, you know, a PT test. Then you do like a 5-mile ruck, a weighted ruck, and then they beat you at the pool for a while. And then after that, there's an interview. And if you're cleared or whatever, if you make it through that, then you get the invite to come and you go to BRC and all that stuff, or amphibious reconnaissance school. That was the process back then. You had to go and try out. And it was kind of interesting because I had a couple, I don't know why they were in the company, but I had a couple past recon guys or dudes that had been at recon. I think maybe they, for their, you know, the knowledge of skills or the skills that they had in boat stuff, they were pulling these guys in. And we had another guy in my platoon that was he was the squad leader, whatever, as a corporal at the time. And he had been a sniper, and they just, you know, talking to us about this stuff, and it just super cool. So I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to do more. I you know, I enjoyed what I was doing at the time, but I was like, I want to do more. But I've always been one of those people, like I said, I'm very like, kind of no bullshit. And I don't like the fuck games, and I don't like stuff like that. And I know the moment that I was like, I'm getting the fuck out. I was sitting at Camp Lejeune getting my hair cut, and I'm facing this big window, and there's dudes, I'd see them, they'd park their car, and they're walking toward the exchange. It's a Saturday afternoon, and some Marines coming out of the exchange, and other guys walking from his car, and the dude just starts like screaming at him about his shirt's not tucked in, or he's not wearing a belt, or in the midst of a haircut. I saw this play out like 3 different times with different groups of people, somebody coming out of the exchange or walking up when somebody else is walking up, and these dudes start yelling at each other, or one's yelling at the other one over just petty bullshit. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. That's not the life. That's not who I am. And I can't stand that crap. And, yeah, I was like, I'm done. I'm not sticking around for this. If this is the attitude, I'm like, I don't want to be around it. So I'm like, I'm going to get out and go to college. So yeah, that 95 sometime I was just like, I went back and told the career planner, like, I'm done. I'm getting out.
Damn. So. And so is that the route you took, Patrick? You went to college and then found your way back in?
Yes and no. So, and I started going to college, and I quickly became bored. College was fine, but it was just like, I always enjoyed the military. I did, you know, it was like the camaraderie, just I like the intensity of things, and I like the camaraderie, and I like sitting around with the guys and bullshitting and just doing stuff. I'm not a fan of the bullshit, the pointless crap. So, yeah. One day I'm like in college, and I'm walking them through the hallway or whatever. I'm like in the student union area, and there was like a little pamphlet thing for 19th group or 20th group, but Army National Guard Special Forces unit. So I'm like, that looks really cool. So I called up the National Guard recruiter in the area, and he's like, hey, thank you for calling me. He's like, but where you're at, there's no Special Forces unit around here. The closest one was in, again, I'm in Southwest Virginia, like the freaking bottom corner there. And he's like, the closest one is like 2 hours from you or something. It was closer to Richmond, which was actually like 4 hours away, I think. I'm like, goddamn, okay, not doing that. So then I was like, I wonder what Marine Reserve units around here. So I found same thing. They had a bunch of pamphlets there. The closest Marine unit was like a motor transport unit in around like Knoxville somewhere, or Johnson City, Tennessee. And I'm like, nope, not doing that. I'm not driving trucks and working on shit and changing oil. I'm not doing that. So I went back and I called the National Guard recruiter again, and I'm like, are there any other like combat units around here? What else is like, what's close to me? And he's like, well, about 40 minutes from you, there's a reconnaissance unit. He called it HHC, like a headquarters something. And he's like, there's a recon unit there, there's a mortar unit, and there's a tow platoon. I'm like, ooh, okay. Let's do that. So I don't remember even the process. I just remember I showed up at drill one weekend and they gave me uniforms, and like I didn't obviously I didn't go through Army boot camp because I'd been a Marine, and so I started doing that. I started drilling with those guys, and it was pretty interesting. You know, they had guys they were sending guys to Ranger school. They were doing sniper stuff, but I ended up with the tow platoon. I'm like, God damn it. You know, I was in the Guard. I actually ended up going to the recon platoon, and I was with those guys for a while, and I ended up same sort of thing, got bored, and they're like, hey, there's this thing going on in Bosnia. And I'm like, send me. Literally, I was the only guy from my entire battalion that volunteered to go to Bosnia. I'm like, I'll go to Bosnia. And they're like, all the guys around me were like, why am I not fucking surprised? Like, I'm not surprised. So I tried to do shit all the time. Like, anytime something came up, like to deploy or do something, I was always the first one. Like, I'll go, send me, you know, I'll do it. So I ended up going to Northern Virginia and spent a year in Bosnia, almost a year, about 10 months there, which was crazy. The guy that, one of the guys in my platoon was from Northern Virginia and worked for the agency. And so that kind of like, he was like, we became really good friends, and he made the suggestion like, hey man, when we get back to the States, I want to introduce you to some people. And so that's how I made that transition into that. I moved from Southwest Virginia up to DC, started working there, you know, and I don't know how much you want to talk about that stuff. I mean, I can talk about a little bit, you know. So
yeah, share what you can. I definitely know the limitations. So whatever you can share, great, and totally get it.
It was super interesting, and I definitely learned a lot. And it was it definitely helped me later on in my military career. You know, I mean, you had a completely different path with those guys. I think the stuff that I did was a little bit more not off the cuff, I would say, but it wasn't like a full-time gig. I mean, you could make it a full-time gig. I worked there enough to make plenty of money, and you know, there was people that did it full-time, but there was also a lot of people that had been like worked for, you know, the courier stuff for the agency, and then like they retired from there and were like part of this team or whatever, and did that for a while. But I mean, you and I have talked about the stuff that I was doing, and it gave me definitely a skill set that I had never had up to that point, and it was super interesting. That's the thing, is I was working for the agency at the time when 9/11 happened. That was a huge thing, and we were just like, dude, we got to do something. And a lot of the guys that I was working with and stuff we talked about, they went on to do like GRS, and they went and did some other things with the agency, and so people were having to start replacing contractors at the gig with like blue badgers and stuff, because people were just like, boom, like shit was chaos, you know, at the agency at the time. And everybody was going to Afghanistan, and I was just like, me and my buddy were just, dude, we got to do something. We can't sit here and do this. You know, we got to get into it. And so we literally pulled out a freaking napkin, and we're like, okay, what are our options? We can go in Marine Corps. We can go in the Navy. I really wish I still had this napkin, because we literally were like, what do we want to do? And I was like, dude, because I had worked with the special boat teams a little bit when I was a SWCC. I mean, when I was with small craft company in the Marine Corps, and it was like day and night. It was like, look at all these guys with the best shit, like the best boats, and like we had nothing, you know.
Marines never have the gear, man. They just don't have. Oh man, forever.
It was the worst. It was funny. So these guys would pull up to the pier, you know, when we were going to do. I remember we did an exercise called Agile Provider, French Foreign Legion came. It was a huge exercise in Camp Lejeune, and some dudes from Special Boat Team 20 came down, and I think there was a SEAL team down there as well. And we were just like, damn, these dudes got everything, man. They had like, they're pulling out their sat phones and setting up all their antennas, and like, dude, we're like, I got a Motorola that if I lose, the Marine Corps is going to cut my nuts off. I mean, that was like high tech for us. But so I was like, dude, let's. I think at the time too, we a couple weeks before that, there'd been a thing on the mall in DC. There'd been like I can't remember what it was. There had been a big military expo thing on the mall. And me and my buddy had walked around, and we talked to some guys from Special Boat Team 20 there, and they're just like, oh yeah, if you guys ever want to come out and like come on down to Norfolk and check it out, blah blah blah, I'll show you around. This dude Castro, I'll never forget the guy's name. And I was like, dude, let's go down there, take this guy up on this, and like look at the unit and see what they actually do. Let's see what it's about. And he's like, yeah, let's go. And we went down there, and he like showed us around. The Master Chief at the time brought us into his office, and he like showed us this video of this new capability that they were developing, where they like throw boats out of a C-130, and the dudes like halo out behind the boats. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
I'm like, that was badass. And like the boats under, like legit, a freaking rib is under canopy, and there's dudes just going around the rib as this thing floats down, and they're just circling. I was like, that is the fucking coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, I want to do that. And so, I was like, and again, it's like, I don't want to go back in the military and go to some line unit and get like cannon fodder. I didn't want to do that, So that's when I was like, dude, let's go in the Navy. And at the last minute, my buddy's like, dude, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do it. So he pulled out, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm doing it. And I just went in. Yeah.
Dude, I don't know much about that. I don't know much about that career field. Like, what is the training process like? Selection? I mean, that's a special ops community, right? Like, what is that? Oh. How hard is it? Tell me about that training. I just don't know anything about it.
You know what? And so I was in class 4-4. So now they're like, I don't even know what they're at now. They're probably at 144 now. So I was still very new when not new. I mean, obviously there was quite a few iterations of that, but at the time before I got there, it had just closed looped, meaning you could spend the rest of your career in that career field. You could, because it used to be talking to other guys. Like when I showed up, they're like, yep, they just got their own SWCC pin. They had just gotten their like own combat, whatever the hell you call it, identifier. I don't know what the hell you call it, but the community was closed loop. So it used to be that they take fleet sailors of certain rates. You had to be like a gunner's mate. You had to be like, everybody was all these different rates. Then they'd put them through SWCC school, which was like, I don't even know how long their initial classes were. And then you'd go to a team, and you'd spend however long at a team, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. And then they'd send you back to the fleet. And so now all this skill set is gone, and you've got to bring in new guys and reteach them. And obviously everybody knew early on that was a retarded way to do things. And so when I got there, like when I came on active duty, it was the same thing. I had to pick a rate. We weren't closed loop. Like now, like when I was there, it was like after maybe, God, I don't fucking know how long it was, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. It had already been closed looped, but then maybe a year or 2 years, it was even longer than that, maybe 3 years, they made it its own rate. So everybody went through, like I came in as an HM. So I had to I showed up to the Navy, freaking up in Great Lakes, and they send me to the Welcome to the Navy class. It was like the dumbest thing ever. You're like, I didn't even have a uniform yet. I'm like in civilian clothes, and It's like they had 2 sections in this barracks: OSVETs, other service veterans, and then NAVETs, people that were coming back on. So everybody's come back on active duty. A bunch of us were other service veterans, not prior, Navy, and then NAVETs, Navy veterans that had gotten out and were coming back in. And they had us all in this barracks together, and they're like, you can be here for 30 days, you can be here for 45 days. You're just waiting for your orders to go to your next thing. And it was hilarious because I remember one day they're like, I'm in a room, like a shitty barracks room, 2 beds in there, the crappy like little side tables and all that stuff. And they got a hold of everybody through the PA system. They're like, Mr. Moltrup, please show up down to the quarterdeck, blah, blah, blah. So I show up down there. I'm like, hey guys, what's up? And they hand me this paper through the little thing. And it's like a list of uniform items. They're like, hey, you're set up at the exchange. Go get your uniform items. And I'm looking at this. I'm like, I don't know what the hell any of this shit is. I show up over at the exchange and I grab a cart, and there was I went over, like I said, to the uniform section, and there was a like little Filipino woman who comes over, and she's like, okay, you just go around, find your size, and then we'll fit it for you, and it all comes out of your check. I'm like, great. So I'm like, jumper top, whatever, jumper bottoms. I'm like, what the fuck is a jumper? I don't know. This is all like the navy blue. So I had to pick out a bunch of goddamn uniform items. I didn't even know what they were. Luckily, I didn't get everything because I'm just like, I don't want to pay for this. Am I going to need this? Like the pea coat, which is like $180 like jacket. I'm like, I'm going to SWCC school. I don't need any of this bullshit. So some of the things I didn't even buy, luckily, because I never needed. And the funny thing was, so when you put on the bell bottom freaking blue things, so this is the silliest thing in the world. On the front, there's like this fucking like 55 buttons that, you got, it's a flap or whatever. On the back, it's like a drawstring. I'm like, well, there's a flap on the back and drawstring in the front. I'm like, it must wear like this. I put it on backwards and come walking out of the goddamn, the try-on room, and the woman there starts laughing. I'm like, what? She's like, that's on backwards, honey. Like, fuck, how am I supposed to know that? So so that was my, and then after that, there's like, you show up at another place for a 2-hour PowerPoint on what the Navy is. And I'm now in the Navy, and it was weird. The kind of funny thing was, there were some cool guys that were actually at the command there at what they call TPU, Transient Personnel Unit. There was actually a dude that was coming back in. He already had his trident. There was a SEAL that was coming back in to go to like, he already had orders to Team 3. He had gotten out, was coming back in. There was another dude, never forget his name because it was so unique, Aerosmith. This dude had been a Bud's dud. He had like came in the Navy, went through Buds, didn't make it, and somehow he got out of the Navy like right afterwards. I don't know how, if he got injured or he finagled something or what, but waited 2 years and came back in and was going to go to Buds again. Then there was another dude that had been a combat controller, had been an Air Force CCT, who was coming back in, who was going to Navy EOD. So it was cool. It was like the four of us all kind of got to know each other, because everybody else was like, I'm going to come back in and be a fucking boiler or whatever. I don't know. There's like a bunch of dudes doing regular Navy shit that we didn't really talk to. And so we would all like work out. We'd go down to we're all right on Lake Michigan or whatever it is. And we'd swim in the freaking freezing water, and we'd go get hammered in Chicago on the weekends. So it was a good time. For a month, again, I was still boozing it up every day, basically, with these dudes. And it wasn't the worst time ever. And then suddenly I had orders to Corps School, and I had to walk down the street to there. So
what is that? Is Corps School the SWCC training? Like,
no,
gauntlet?
That's Navy Corps. That's like my hospital. That's your, like, that was my.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Corpsman. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Corpsman. So it was like Navy Corps School. And it was funny because I've got all these freaking ribbons and shit from the Marine Corps, and I'm wearing my Navy crap with all my ribbons and stuff on it. And I show up there with my orders, and the dude at the desk is like, he's like, no, man. He's like, staff checks in someplace else. I'm like, I'm not staff. I'm a student. And he's like, oh, okay, man. And it's kind of funny because I like he gave me a room assignment, and I like went up to the barracks. They were actually fairly nice. I go up there and something was broken in my room. I don't remember what it was. And I go back down and I'm like, hey man, the other secretary in my room's all busted up. And he's like, okay, you know what? He goes, I just won't put anybody else in your room with you. And he scratches that space off on the card. I instantly went back up to the room, took apart the other bed, took apart all the other shit in my room, and carried it down to the hall and threw it into somebody else's empty room, and like moved my bed into the better center of the room. And like that weekend I went and got a nice car, like totally outfitted the room for myself, and went and got a decanter kit, and like had set and had like booze on top of my refrigerator in the corner. And it was pretty funny. The first room inspection, the staff, he was like a HM2, like a E5 or whatever. He's like, Moltrup, you can't have a fucking decanter set in your room. He's like, you need to put that in your locker during the inspections. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Oh,
so yeah, fun stuff.
Well, tell me what the training was like for SWCC, man. How hard is that? What does it look like?
It sucks, man. It's every day is Monday. You know, I mean, it's I went through Corps school, finished that. And then I had a kind of a weird situation because most of the time, and I'm sure you know, you go through your training and then you get orders for SEER school. You go through SEER and then you go to your final unit and you're like ready to go. Like, send me out the door, coach. I'm good to go. I don't know why I got orders to SEER school right before SWCC school. So I left it totally, and it fucked me up. And I had a buddy who's was a great fucking dude. Man, he was just a great dude. And somehow we ended up with the same bullshit orders. We ended up going to SEER school before SWCC, before INDOC. So we, got our asses handed to us in SEER school. And I'm not a huge guy. I mean, I'm like 190 pounds right now. And I think at the time I was probably 175, 180. I lost like 12 or 13 pounds. He lost like almost 20 pounds. We showed up to SWCC school. They were already about 2 weeks into INDOC, which again was, I think, because of our SEER orders, it totally screwed up. We weren't there at the very start of the class. We show up and we walk into, they were in the midst of some class in on the amphib side. And there's a senior chief who's like teaching the class. And I walk in with my orders. I can't remember, but I remember we were in our blues and everyone else is in their camis. And he's like, he looks at me and he looks at my freaking ribbons and stuff. He's like, were you a Marine or are you just a fucked up seaman? Cause I'm an E3. I'm a freaking, whatever, fucking HN at the time, hospitalman, whatever. I was an E3. And, I'm like, I was a Marine senior chief. And he's like, all right, go sit down. And so after the class, they pulled me and my buddy aside and they're like, listen, fucking retards, you guys just showed up 2 weeks into INDOC. You've got to go take your PST, like your screening test again. Cause apparently that was like when everybody showed up day one of INDOC, you take your screening test. And that was like a quick way for them to weed out people that showed up not in shape. And we're just like, I mean, I felt like a bag of hammered dicks. My buddy, same thing. I mean, we were completely smoked we had just come out of the field, like on Thursday, did our debrief on Friday, and Friday afternoon, we're like being told, hey, tomorrow morning, you're going to go do your PST. We both failed it. We just had no energy, and so I failed my initial PST, and because it's pull-ups, you have to do a minimum of like 12 or 13 pull-ups, a 3-mile run, 500-meter swim, and so pull-ups, swim, push-ups, sit-ups,
Yeah.
That's everything. So it's a lot, and it's right after each other. It's like, all right, get out of the pool, put your freaking running shoes on, go 3 miles, go. And like, I don't remember what I failed. I failed a couple things, and my buddy failed. Like, he failed the swim, he failed the pull-ups. We just had no upper body strength, and they ripped into us. They're like, "You two idiots!" They're like, "Next Friday, you're taking the PST again. You fail, you're out of here." Ooh. So one of the things when in SWCC school, they give you a freaking like Alice pack, and you've got fins in there. You've got a bunch of shit in there that you carry around constantly. You got your freaking helmet, and you run around with an oar all the time. So we're running around with that bullshit. And in the morning, I would run over to like little mini mart and throw about 4 or 5 cans of like protein drinks in my pack, and I was just drinking those all day long, trying to like put weight back on, trying to get my strength. And so I'm like doing push-ups all the time, and in the midst of all this, we're doing a little bit of classes here and there, but it's like, hey, you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's the pool, then it's freaking the O course, then it's a run, then it's we're going through that stuff for a week. That next Friday, we did our screening again. I passed, and my buddy failed again, and they kicked him out.
Oh,
yeah.
Shit.
He ended up, yeah, all because of that. And this dude was a machine, and I have no doubt he would have made it. And I mean, physically, he was ready. And he ended up going to Iraq with a stay platoon from Camp Lejeune, and got caught in an ambush and lost an eye. And dude, it's like you can literally see in that moment where this guy's life completely changed, but great dude. We're still really good friends. And, but yeah, so
damn.
And that was just showing up freaking for Indoc. So,
and so is SWCC a lot of, is it certainly it's physically demanding, it's shooting, you're on the boats all the time, I would imagine. Like, is that accurate or no?
Yes. Yeah. And so I don't know I couldn't tell you what the current iteration is.
Yeah.
And it's from the time that I went through until today. I know it's changed a bunch of times. I don't quite know what the process is now, but when I was there, it was basically broken up into phases. You went through Indoc. It was very, very similar to BUDS. First phase, second phase, third phase. Whole first phase is just a beatdown. Like I said, every day is Monday. You're just getting thrashed. It's one iteration of a workout to the next, and that's kind of like to weed people out. My class started with well over 100 guys. We were a pretty large class, like 110, maybe 115 guys, and we ended up graduating like 16 or 17. Something like that. Wow. 18 maybe. So the attrition rate was huge. And it was funny because when I showed up, there was a guy that had been a rollover from another class. He had claimed an injury, which we all knew was bullshit. It was just one of those guys who's like a fucking loudmouth. He's a big dude too. And I remember one of the weekends when we were out during Indoc, and he walked up to me wherever we were out in a bar or whatever in Coronado, and he's like, dude, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to fucking make it. He's like, you're not a real Navyman. Because I'd been a Marine, he's like, you're not going to make it. Okay, motherfucker, whatever. Like, drive on. And sure enough, like 2 weeks later in the pool, he quit. He's like, feigned a groin injury or some crap like that. And then he quit. And you're just like, go away, man. Like,
damn.
It's stuff like that, though. It's, for me personally, when I would see bigger dudes that were, I thought, like physically more imposing or ran their mouth a lot more, when those dudes would quit, it was like, it just gave me energy, it just drove me on, like, you don't have it, man,
So when I was looking up SWCC for this, I just want to read this thing from the site, right? Like, this is the website that the Navy's putting out. So, Special Warfare Combatant-Craft Crewmen are specially trained to operate in and around rivers, coastal regions of the world. Extreme firepower, deadly skill. They operate to support 1, special warfare, special ops missions, and 2, as well as conducting direct action and special reconnaissance missions of their own. So, certainly sounds awesome. Like, what is the day-to-day like when you're in garrison? And then if you could like if we jump to combat, like what does that look like in that role for people who've never been in it?
And there's been such a, and again, like I like thinking about, especially it's a very small force. So when you talk about, I don't off the top of my head, it's been years. I mean, just like all of us, I've read a ton of books about different special operations units and stuff. And I remember reading one time they were saying that I think the force for Army Special Forces is like over 10,000 guys. It's a huge force. SEALs, quite a bit smaller. I think more to 2,000 to 3,000 maybe. The time when I was in and I remember we were always manned at about 80%. We were never fully manned. And I don't think anybody really ever is, but
yeah,
they were saying, so you've got Special Boat Team 20, which is on the East Coast, Special Boat Team 12, which is on the West Coast, and Special Boat Team 22, which is a riverine unit, is down in Stennis, Mississippi. And at any one time, there's 450 guys on active duty total.
Wow.
So very small force. And, through the years, I mean, they've been involved in everything in different manners. So, and it's changed a lot. Like, we had guys in Iraq, we had guys had gone to Afghanistan doing like, JTAC stuff. I mean, exactly like it says, is 100% across the spectrum of warfare, or across the spectrum of operations for, the special operations, like you said, from direct actions, special reconnaissance, all that. They do it all. And there's a lot of guys that are out the door to other units and things like that. So again, really on par with what a lot of other units are doing, but very much, I think there was a one of the little motivator videos that they put out years ago. And it was like, the best kept secret in the Navy, and 100% it is.
You jump to like the first time you're in a combat environment with this organization. Like where were you? Where do you find yourself? I think when you talk to somebody who's an infantryman or a SEAL or someone else, it's a little easier to be like, oh, that makes sense. What is your experience like? What was your first time in combat with these guys?
Well, so, and it wasn't necessarily, this isn't like, so my very first deployment, and this is crazy, and it sucks talking about it because it's the thing that everybody knows about. So when you're working in an NSW environment, like the way that they deploy is as a squadron. So it's a SEAL platoon, and you'll team up with a special boat team, a DET was a word, detachments. So you'll team up with a SEAL platoon and a DET, and then you'll deploy together. But it starts out with ULT, which is 6 months unit level training. And everybody's going through their whole stuff, and you're going through your shooting schools, and you're going through all the stuff that the guys need to deploy. And then the second 6 months is squadron level training. So you kind of team up and you do boarding and stuff. You'll do tons of live fire stuff. You integrate those two entities, and you learn to work together. And then the next 6 months or longer is your deployment. So that's the cycle. So you got about a year and a half of, a year of training. You deploy for 6 months. I don't think I ever had a single 6 months. It was always longer than that. And then you come back. So my very first squadron they put us together, and it was Danny Dietz, Mike Murphy, all those guys. So, and it was like all the other guys from the platoon, a lot of, dudes people don't know. They had a second lieutenant besides Mike, and little short Italian dude. I don't remember his name. But it was their squadron was actually interesting. It was their thing was a mix of guys from SDV Team 1 and dudes from Team 10, and they put them together. So when we deployed, we all showed up in Bahrain together, because that's where Naval Special Warfare Group 3, I think, is in Bahrain. And that's where everybody kind of works out of initially. You show up to Bahrain, you check in, and you start doing whatever you're going to do. And so pretty early on, they split up the SEAL platoon, and a bunch of the guys all those dudes went up to Iraq. And I don't think there was much going on at the time. There was nothing that I think, got pulled in for. So the rest of the dudes from my detachment and the other half of their SEAL platoon went off and started doing JSAT stuff all around the Middle East. We went up into Iraq. I think we went as far as north as Basra, and we were doing a bunch of stuff where we were clearing ships, hulks of ships along the Euphrates, because when everything kicked off, the shipping had to stay going through the Euphrates into the northern part of the Gulf, and ships were taking shots and stuff from the shore, all these like hulks that were on the side. So we went up there and we're doing, basically checking these things out, clearing the ships and doing things like that. And I wouldn't even call it, there was nothing major went on. I wouldn't call it combat, but I mean, yeah, we're like, fuck, dude, somebody's shooting at us, and shit like that. It wasn't to the point where it was like super pucker factor, but I remember we were staying in Kuwaiti Naval Base, K&B is what they call it at the time. And we're like, we got word like, hey, the other platoon, half of the platoon is going into Afghanistan. Like, oh, fuck, and it's like, dude, we're all brothers, man. We're like playing volleyball, hanging out, training every day. We're working with the Kuwaitis. We were teaching them boarding exercises, boarding stuff, and, taking them through the shoot houses, and you're just doing all that stuff. And I think we left K&B. We all went back down to Bahrain, and we were in Bahrain for maybe a week, and we went to Doha, Qatar, and we were doing all that stuff in Qatar. We were doing all the same sort of stuff. We did the same kind of stuff, doing training for these guys, and we get word that there'd been an incident in Afghanistan. And so all those dudes, like the whole SEAL platoon, the rest of those guys were like, fuck, we're done. Get us out of here. So they put them on a plane and they sent them. I don't know where they went after that, but they all went into country to go look for those dudes. And, everybody walking around at that time too. And we got cut short because they're like, well, you need to go back to Bahrain because shit has gotten crazy. These dudes are missing. We don't know what's happening. So a couple days after they left, we left. I remember our trip got cut short, and the shitty thing is, we were part of my detachment was a Mark V det, so it was like the bigger boats. So we couldn't just hop on a fucking plane. We had two 81-foot craft that we had to haul ass from Qatar all the way back to Bahrain, and we sat around for a couple of days, and there wasn't a whole lot going on. We're just like, what's going on with these dudes? What's happening? And obviously pretty short over, like the NSW didn't really, at the time, the command wasn't really putting out what happened. And dudes started like hearing about what happened to Latrell, to Marcus, and everybody's like, it was crazy because our deployment wasn't much longer after that. We got back to the States, and everybody was calling him the One. Hey man, did you hear about the One? Like, blah, blah, he made it, blah, and a lot of people didn't know who it was. And so it was like, for a first deployment, for a first NSW deployment, for something like that to happen. Yeah. It was just like, it was sobering to say the least, and yeah.
So Patrick, I mean, for those who aren't as familiar, right, you're talking about Marcus Latrell, lone survivor, Operation Red Wing. That incident was part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, and a lot of people, I mean, some people know this, some people don't if you follow, but like Marcus has a twin brother, Morgan, and not that long after that. So in the compound for Special Boat Team 20, you share a building with Naval Special Warfare Group 4, which is sort of the overarching command for all the boat teams. So Naval Special Warfare Group 4 is in charge of all the boat teams. And so there was Naval Special Warfare Group 1 is on the West Coast, and they're in charge of all the SEAL teams out there. Naval Special Warfare Group 2 is on the East Coast as well, but they're in charge of all the East Coast SEAL teams. So that's kind of the hierarchy. And it was weird because his twin brother, Morgan, was working at at the group 4 at the time. You see this dude walking around, you're like, whoa, man.
Wow.
Yeah, it was just like, and then of course they're super similar dudes. I mean, obviously they're twin brothers, and you're just like, what's up, man? And I always like, hey, how's your brother doing? He's good, man. He's good, and it was a very weird, surreal experience. And especially for it, like through the years is all that's like, it really came out and it's blown up more. And, yeah, very, very weird. Very weird.
Yeah. What an odd experience for your first like real deployment as you described it, right? For that to happen.
Yeah. And it was, and it was like, we didn't, because the platoon got separated fairly quickly. We only did, we went through our whole, squadron level training at SQT the ULT and then SQT together, all squadron level training and stuff. So we don't like spend the weekends together and hang out. I mean, we're all working around Norfolk and stuff. And so you get to kind of know the guys so I didn't know them super, super well, but it was just like, we came together, we did, hey man, what's going on? Blah, 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 whatever. And it's just such a weird thing to right off the box, all that stuff that kind of happened to those guys. And, so, and then later on, it was kind of crazy. Years later, I was working for GoRuck, and Mike Murphy was a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and they reached out to us to do like a memorial GoRuck thing for the ROTC program there. And I went over and did that, and it was just a great honor to meet all these guys, and there was a big memorial for Mike at Penn State, and super, super cool though.
Dude. All right. So if we then jump to a place where you kind of described, like, that wasn't the pucker factor, the boarding and that, but certainly the experience itself was unlike what most people experience their first time out. If you go to a place where you had this big pucker factor, where would you go? Like, where were you at in your career?
A few years later. So, that was in the 2005 timeframe when all that stuff happened. And then, I actually was at the boat team until 2009, and I left and was going over to another unit, but I had gotten pulled up because I had been a medic, had been a trauma medic, special operations medic. I got pulled up to do some augment stuff. And that was 4 months in Iraq. And that was the pucker factor, and the classic go and do, raids at night. And, my primary job there was exactly that, as the, I wasn't going in first. I was the freaking guy that was there to patch wounds and stuff. And, I actually still have, the ISR video from like one of our first times out that I was working with the guys, and, dudes blowing themselves up. And, as soon as these guys made entry, like, super heavy resistance, and guys took rounds right off the bat. And so that was the pucker factor. And, and it's super intense, and that's the only thing you're thinking about at the time, just to get to these guys and fucking drag them out of there and do exactly what you need to do, but it's an intensity in a, that's like the only thing that exists in your life. I don't know. It's hard to describe.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, I had a couple questions on that, Patrick. So were you teamed up with Marines? Were you with some other Navy units? Like,
yes. So I was with Gold Squadron at the time, those guys. And and so 4 months of, almost every night, either, raids to helicopter or we'd go in by frickin' vehicle and then ruck into a frickin' compound, or, you know, doing surveillance in some place. And yeah, so, and that was pretty constant, pretty high level of just night after night, you know, amazing experience. And I would never, 100% one of the best times of my life. You know, I mean, guys that operate at a level that, you know, you just don't see, with an intensity that you don't see normally in the military. And, it's exactly what I wanted to do, you know, so great opportunity.
Did they embrace you as like part of the crew, Patrick? I mean, you're kind of an outsider coming in, right?
Yes, 100%. So, and that's the thing, is like, when you go there, like, I showed up to the medical, that's the whole process, is kind of like, showed up to the medical department. I meet the guy. I knew a couple of the guys. And so it's like, you kind of have to be like, somebody has to bring up your name. Like, hey, I know this guy. And I knew a dude that worked over there at the time, and I had talked to him, and they were like, yeah, we can get you over here. So I went over, and just the medical department alone, you do a bunch of interviews and stuff. You talk to all those guys. And then initially I just spent a week over there, just going through, you know, they're putting me through trauma scenarios, putting me through different scenarios. And then I'm like, you know, working out over there, doing all that stuff, kind of getting to know the guys. And then you find out what squadron you're going to go to. And it's the same sort of thing. You know, you sit down with all the chiefs, and they're like, hey, motherfucker, like, you've got your shit wired tight, right? Blah, 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 you know? So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a vetting process. And there was actually another guy who showed up there who had been a Navy SARC, which was the recon guys, the amphibious reconnaissance corpsman. He showed up at the same time. Good dude. And I think he had been, he was from Camp Lejeune, and he'd been with 2nd Recon out there or something. And he had some super good dude, literally, like, not a problem with him at all, but he had some family issues going on at the time. And he wasn't the only one. I was actually going through a fucking divorce at the time. And, but I was like, never brought it up, never like, hey man, I'll stay till fucking midnight if you guys need me to. Like, I'm making blowout kits for everybody, you know, doing the shit that I needed to do. And I just never, you focus on the job, and that was it. But he had some like family issues, and was like, hey, can I go to do this? And they finally were just like, hey dude, no, sorry, it's not going to work out. So damn. Yeah. So it's like a constant vetting process, even to get into that, to be their 100%. Medic. Yes.
Incredible.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing was, I mean, and it was cool. It was an honor. And like, so I'd done that, and I'd end up going to this advisory unit after that, another amazing experience, and spending almost another like 10 months in Afghanistan. But I was getting ready to leave Afghanistan, coming back to the States, and I get a random email to my like Afghan email account, but I don't think I ever got one goddamn email from anybody to this. I don't know. Were you ever in Afghanistan or whatever?
Yep. I was. Like, I was in Afghanistan.
You get the email address for like being in country or whatever. Nobody ever emailed me shit. And I checked it like once a month, and I checked it one day, and I'm like, whoa, who's this? And it was a dude that had been, when I was at the boat team, he had been like a first class or whatever, but he was a med dude over there. And he's like, hey Patrick, hey, I saw that you're in Afghanistan, you know, hey, I know about your deployments. I know where you've been, and blah, blah, blah. He's like, when can I call you? I'm like, okay, give me a call. And he's like, hey, we've got this new unit that's spinning up. He's like, you'll be doing like a QRF kind of thing. You'll be like one terrain feature away from the assault team. And then if you have to go in there, blah, 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 you know, we're looking for trauma guys that have experience and have deployments. And I still to this day don't know exactly what the unit was. And he said it was I'd be in North Carolina and whatever. And I'm not going to but yeah. And I'm just like, this was gonna like, and I was leaving Afghanistan, I already had orders to SEER school, and it was going to be my first non-deployable unit in like 15 years. And I'm just like, I hadn't seen my daughter in I don't know how long. And I was just like, it was the first time that I ever sort of stepped away from that, kind of and I feel like I stepped away from the job a little bit, like stepped away from wanting to be the first person in the door and put my family first, I guess, and so I was just like, and with that, you asked me earlier about like, something that was a conflicting moment. That definitely was. And I was like, man, I wanted to more than anything, but I also wanted to see my daughter, so I was like, I didn't do it. And that's the one thing I was like, I wonder what that would have been like,
Shit, man.
But yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about, man. I think so many people who listen to this will know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. But it was like, yeah. And the reality is I hadn't, I'm in Afghanistan, like trying to call. I had a ex-wife that wasn't the greatest person to deal with. And I remember I'm like, I somehow got away. I'm in Spin Boldak, this cop on the border of Pakistan. And I'm like calling 12 hours back to my daughter's, her first grade class or whatever. And I'm like trying to get a hold of her on her birthday so I could wish her happy birthday. And yeah, they're like, the school's like, who are you? Who is this? And I'm like, I'm in Afghanistan. I'm trying to get a hold of my daughter, Ava. She's in a classroom, blah, blah, like, and they were like, oh my God, yeah, we'll go get her. So it was like thinking about that while I'm deployed and all the crazy stuff that went on that deployment. I was just like, I want to be home,
Yeah.
I want to be home. And yeah.
Dude, so Patrick, if I could take you to the time, like you were referring to maybe the time with Gold Squadron, right? Like you're going in, you're doing these hits, probably multiple hits a night, and you're the medic. Like you are there to keep people alive. I've not interviewed a medic before, but I'm just curious, like when you're working on someone, I imagine it's got to be like a baseball pitcher. Like you just got to block everything out. Doesn't matter what the hell's going on around you, just to work on somebody. Is there one of those moments that comes to you where you're like, oh, this was insane? Like the type of injury, the activity around?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. A lot of them are like that. I mean, I've worked on good guys and I've worked on bad guys. I mean, that's part of, that's your job. You have to do that. And I mean, not just that deployment, but the next one. I mean, there's just so many instances where you're just like, holy shit. Like there's a bad guy that I worked on. This dude had taken a round through the back. I just showed up at this outpost in Afghanistan, Maiwan province. I was there to help augment 7th group. There were some 7th group dudes that were there, and we were Maiwan. What the hell was the name of that cop? I don't remember what the name of the cop was. It was in Maiwan province. Like my first day, and the guy, nobody was really at the cop at the time. The guys were out, and there was like a skeleton crew there. There's a couple dudes in the TOC, and the SF team had some security guys there that were like 82nd Airborne or something like that. And these dudes were the ones pulling security. And me and this Marine lieutenant show up, and I get word that there's a dude in the aid station that's been shot. I'm like, what are you serious? So I run over there. I walk in, and they're trying to wrestle this Afghan guy down on the ground, or not down on the ground, but down to this stretcher. And I'm like, what the fuck? What's going on? And it was like chaos in there, of course, like if you can think about something like that. And they're like, this dude was brought in. He was a fucking bad guy running from somebody, and they shot him. And he had kind of mid-back, went in his back and came out right under his that little point under your sternum is called the xiphoid process. That little tiny bone that feels like sharp right there. The round came out right there. You have a descending aorta or an artery that descends from your heart down in, and then it splits into your pelvis and all of those arteries. He had taken a round like right through there. And I think, man, if this guy had been on an operating table, he probably wouldn't have survived, but he was super combative. And these medics from the 82nd are trying to like hold this guy down. And they're trying to like physically hold them down with their hands while somebody puts an IV in him. I'm like, fucking tie this guy down. He was so combative, I can totally understand. I mean, you develop, and they talk about it all the time in the trauma courses, you develop like that sensation of death and people freak out. And I've seen it a multitude of times. And that's what the guy was doing. He was losing his shit. And I'm like, you need to treat him for the pain. So we gave him some freaking fentanyl. We had fentanyl lollipops at the time, and we gave him some fentanyl. He instantly calmed down, put an IV in him, and within about 45 seconds, he expired. And I mean, the blood just pouring through, and it was like one of those litters that's the mesh, Yeah. There's not, I mean, it's not like the solid green, like almost like not vinyl, but like the solid green nylon litters. It was the black mesh ones. Blood is just pouring out of this guy's back. And I mean, yeah, but I mean, again, like another time, I'm treating a guy that multiple AK rounds to his femur and just gushing blood. And the thing is, like right off the bat, it's, hey, stop the bleeding, right? That's the first thing you do is so you put a tourniquet on the guy, wrench it down, and he took like 3 AK rounds to the upper thigh. 7.62. These things are beefy rounds. I start pushing gauze into it, and it felt like when you break a glass and the glass is like those super fine shards. That's what it felt like in his upper thigh. His femur was just in shards. The guy ended up losing his left leg. I mean, something like that. It's just, you break your leg. You can put that stuff back together or whatever, but something like that where you just splinter your femur, there's nothing that you can do, but it's again, like and I'm just boom, 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 stuffing that in there, then at that point, then it's like, I'm thinking about, treating the dude for pain, treating him for infection, getting blood into him, doing all, I mean, the thing is that I always love trauma work because whatever you're doing, you get feedback instantaneously. It's like, I've got tons of friends, you know what I'm saying? If you're fucking up,
yeah, man,
that person's going to go down. If you're doing the right shit, the person's either going to stabilize or they're going to start getting better. And, you're stopping that. You get instantaneous results and you get instantaneous feedback. I've got tons of friends who, all the schooling that we've gone to, and they're off their PAs. I've got my buddy that lost his eye. He's a PA now, or he had been for a long time. I think he said, fuck it. And he went on to do something else. But it's like, I've done patient care in the past, like working at the team and stuff. And you're the sick call guy and you got to stand there and listen to people give you bullshit about how they did whatever they did. And you got to treat their bullshit like, I hate that crap because it's like, especially in the civilian world nowadays, it's working in an emergency room or treating people. People come in, they lie to you. They're trying to get drugs. It's a bunch of drama and it's bullshit. I can't stand that. But if I could have a career where I just worked trauma, that would be the jam. Although it's insanely stressful. It's like somebody's life is in your hands at that exact point.
Literally.
It's insanely fulfilling and it's insanely depressing too, because there's been dudes that I didn't save, and it's like, that's the stuff. And I can see where guys come home and they're like, you have nightmares or you have a bad day. I mean, my last deployment, I came home and I had the same nightmare over and over and over about this room filling up with blood from this kid I put in a chest tube and, fucking make the incision, put in the chest tube. He had multiple fractures. His pelvis was crushed. And a lot of times you put in a chest tube and the expectation is that there might be a little blood that comes out, start emptying any potential, blood that's filling up that cavity. I've never seen so much blood come out of a chest tube before. And he never regained consciousness and he expired pretty soon after that. But it's like, that's the kind of shit that sucks,
Yeah.
And that's why, like, when the guy's like, hey, you want to deploy again? It's like, that's the decision when it's not that hard to make,
So I don't want to keep you all day, Patrick. Like, I'd like to talk about what's going on now with you with Savage Actual and like, how did that come about, man? Like,
that was the most random thing in the world.
Sorry, I should say, Patrick, for those who don't know, what is that? And then how did that come about? Because it's a departure from what, to some degree from what you came from.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I dipped my toe in the business world a little bit prior to coming off of active duty. I'm a patent holder for a unique belt design. I own a company called GPM Kit, and I patented a kind of a replacement for the Rigger's belt, which I hated. So I did that for a long, and I still do it. It's very low key. I don't really do a ton of stuff to promote it because I have enough sales and stuff. And a lot of military people buy it. A lot of, sell to a lot of like law enforcement, a lot of like marshals and stuff, because it's basically a super low profile belt that doesn't require a buckle. So you can like wear gear, I don't know if you ever seen guys with like the Rigger's belt that everybody freaking wears. And it's like, people will like move it off to the right side so it's not jamming in your stomach and stuff. So I did that for a long time. Like I said, I still have that. I've got a friend that actually runs it for me. I don't do a ton of stuff with it, kind of like fire.
Nice.
It.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. And then, my wife actually worked in the movie industry for years. She's been in a bunch of movies, was in like multiple seasons of that motorcycle movie TV show, Sons of Anarchy. So she's from like Southern California. And so she's like that, Southern California.
Yeah.
We're very different, but very much the same. So she gets casting stuff all the time. So this was like pre-pandemic, before the world fucking collapsed in on itself. She's like, hey, I got this, there's this casting call for a company called Gameology, and they are looking for some special operations guys to talk about video games or something like that. Or I don't even know if it said exactly what it was. So I was bored. I'm like, yeah, I'll call them. I call them up, and they're like, hey, can you do like a 2-minute, like send us a 2-minute video of you talking about something, blah, 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 blah. And I think I talked about when I got crushed between that Chinook and the freaking my boat. And I talked about that a little bit. And they're like, oh, we love you. You're hilarious, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, do you have somebody else that you can bring? And at the time, this is in LA, I thought my buddy Jason Lilly, who you'll talk to soon, is he was working in LA, I thought, but he had moved back down to San Diego. But anyway, so he's like, yeah, man, I'll come up. Let's do this. So we sat down with this company and we talked about video games. So like we shot like 6 episodes, and it was huge. And still to this day, they're the like top 3 or 4 videos that they've ever made. We've had like 50 million views on like 6 videos. So, but they were kind of, I don't want to talk too bad. I don't want to talk about them. They were kind of a pain in the ass. They didn't exactly pay me. And so they were a little shisty, and I'm like, oh, so yeah, this stuff blew up. And I said, Jason, I was like, dude, we need to do this ourselves, start our own channel, do this ourselves, man. It doesn't look like that hard and it'll be fun. And he's like, nah. He even said, he's like, he kind of told me a couple times, he's like, oh yeah, man, that sounds like fun. Well, okay, we'll do that. And then I didn't hear anything from him. And I call him back. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, oh yeah, okay. So finally I convinced him, and we did a couple episodes called it Savage Actual. And we kind of stayed in the same sort of framework of what we did with Gameology. And within like a week, we had like 30,000 followers or something like that. It blew up. And then, I mean, we started that like, you know, kind of into the pandemic a little bit, and it's been fun. We shoot like once a month, and it's our own YouTube channel that we talk about video games initially is what we were doing, kind of talking about shooter games, first person shooter, like Call of Duty and all that stuff. But we've expanded it a little bit. Now we've got a series called War Stories and Beer, where we sit down with like veterans and drink some beers and just talk about stuff. One of the first episodes we had this guy Trey, who was a ranger dog handler, and just sat around drinking beers and talking to him, and just, it was a great time, you know? And so, it's been awesome. Savage Actual freaking got over 80,000 followers in the midst of all this. We got sponsored by Black Rifle Coffee Company. We actually just got sponsored by a local brewery who's gonna support our War Stories and Beer. And the best part is, they just called us the other day. They're like, we want to do a Savage Actual labeled beer. So
how great is that?
I know, like our channel has our own beer. So we put out the partnership and stuff, and the beer will probably be out. I mean, they're already getting ready to start brewing, but it's going to be a blood orange wheat. And nice. I think we're going to try and have our first meet and greet at the brewery in Temecula, California. It's Iron Fire Brewery. Check it out.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Iron Fire Brewery. They're making our own Savage Actual labeled beer. And we've got a lot of other stuff coming up. Dude. I mean, it's blown up, and it's been pretty awesome. We're getting ready to work with I don't know if we mentioned this, we're getting ready to work with a game developer. I don't want to get, I can't say that with the contracts and stuff haven't been all finalized, but yeah, we're going to be assisting them with the creation of a game, and Jason and I are going to be in the game with Jocko Willenick, and it's kind of crazy. Yeah. So, and the crazy thing is, Jason is a super big gamer. He plays all the time, and I enjoy it, but it's never something that I've been just like, I'm a gamer. I would never consider myself that, but I've definitely learned a lot about it in the past few months. But yeah, it's fun. It's been more than I expected. It's been more than Jason and I both expected at this point, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of brings the comics and the art kind of full circle, I would think. And, I interviewed John Stryker Meyer, who was a Vietnam vet, and he was saying he and Jocko were working together on a video game as well. So I don't know if Jocko's got his hands in other video games or
probably
not.
But that guy, he cracks me up. I've never met him before, but I know tons of dudes that have, and he's like, obviously Jocko's just super intense, and I'm looking forward to it because we have to do motion capture and all that other stuff for this.
Sure. So that's cool, man.
Getting the opportunity to like say hey to him, and you know, and obviously in that community, everybody, it's NSW is way smaller than a lot of the other groups, and so I guarantee we know a lot of the same people, and it'll be interesting to chat with him and truly see how intense he is.
Dude, that's awesome. All right, I got two more questions. I'll let you get out of here. It's two questions I like to ask everybody. Patrick, the first one is, when you were going into combat, were there any items that you carried with you that had like sentimental value or good luck, something that somebody gave you that you always wanted to have on you or near you when you were deploying?
Randomly, I used to carry this. I was in Virginia Beach one day, and it was actually when I was working to develop my belt. I was driving from the base over to the gear company that was kind of sewing my stuff at the time, that was developing my prototypes. And I was in like Virginia Beach Boulevard, and I stop at this big 4-way intersection, and I look in the middle of the intersection, and there's a flag. Like, it was like one of those ones that had been on like somebody's like the window, like plastic window thing. You know what I'm saying? Like the little plastic pole that you put in your window or whatever. And it was sitting in the middle of the road. I mean, Virginia Beach Boulevard, and I don't even know what the other, like maybe Lynn Haven Boulevard or something, I think is the 4-way. I mean, it's a huge intersection. And I drive a Jeep Wrangler, and the top was off, the doors were off, and I'm in uniform. And I'm like, there's a fucking flag sitting at the middle of the road. And I just pulled the emergency brake and got out of my Jeep and walked over and picked it up. And sure enough, it was nice too. It was like this really nice, well-made sewn flag. I got back in my Jeep, and it's something that I always kept with me. And it was nice because it's like, you know, maybe that big. And I always kept it folded up and had it in my chest pouch. And I think I've had it on almost every single deployment. So yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool. All right. And then last question, I think I know the answer, but I like to ask everyone. I mean, you have spent time, it sounds like, in the Marines, the Navy, and the Army, in the National Guard, oddly enough.
I know. I just need to hit up the Air Force and see if they can
let me do it. Man.
And I get the 4-way action going on.
That's right, man. So just looking back on that time, especially having to treat people the way you did, and as a medic, but the raids, everything that you went through, would you do all that again?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know if I said this at the beginning, you know, it was going into the Marine Corps. I wanted to do something more, you know, and it was like looking at, hey, this potential career that I had ahead of me with being an artist or being whatever, whatever it would have become of that. I knew even then that it wouldn't match the experience I would have as a Marine and whatever else was going to go on with my life, you know. I am definitely one of those people who has anybody that's contacted me, and I've had a lot of people, like Jason and I have people reach out to us all the time. I've had, you know, I worked with GoRuck for a long time, like leading those endurance events and doing all this stuff. And you have tons of people, and I've got guys that I've interacted with that have gone on to become Army Rangers and have gone on to do amazing things. And, you know, it's amazing. It's like, it's the military gives you something that you can't experience anyplace else, a better understanding of the world around you. It's, my wife and I say it all the time. It's like these people who you hear on the news, or these kids in college, they talk about the world like they know it inside and out. And all they've done is, you know, listen to their professors or read it in a book. Get yourself a fucking passport and go out and see the rest of the world. Go to Africa and see how people live. Go to Europe, like go to Central and South America. You don't have to go to war. I'm definitely not a proponent of that, because I think this country could maybe rein some of that in a little bit, but getting out of your own backyard and experiencing the world as it truly is, and talking to people, the military will do that for you, and you get paid to do it. And there's nothing else there's nothing else that will give you that experience in any way, shape, or form. And you will meet people from every corner, socioeconomic corner of the United States. I mean, especially being in the reserves. I had guys in my platoon that worked for the CIA. One of them was a lawyer. Another one owned his own woodworking business. One was a federal police officer. You meet people and you interact with people in a way that you will never anywhere else. So yeah, 100%. That's without a doubt. I'll take the good and the bad, and I would do it all again.
Perfect way to end it, man. This has been a lot of fun, Patrick. Look forward to talking to Jason as well, hearing his side of Savage Actual. Thanks for the time. We'll have links to everything here for folks to find you guys.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this combat story. People often write to me with incredible stories and suggestions for interviews. If you want to share a combat story of your own or from someone you served with, record yourself for up to 5 minutes and email it to ryan@combatstory.com. I'll select some of these stories and feature them at the end of our episodes. Thanks for listening. Stay safe.